Hello there, and welcome to this introduction to cybersecurity. The aims of this session is to take you through what is cybersecurity, what the usual cybersecurity risks are, what steps you can take to mitigate them, and what some of the frameworks and best practices are out there to help you. So let's start with what is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is defined as the body of technologies, processes and practices designed to protect networks, computers, programs and data from attack, damage or unauthorized access. Very much your IT and data infrastructure, protecting it so that you can deliver services, you can make money and you can service your citizens. Why is cybersecurity important? This figure, taken from a website that keeps a track of all breaches around the world, has reported since May 2013 that just over 14.7 billion records have been lost or stolen throughout the world. Now that's a staggering figure. Some of these will be personal data, some of them will be other bits of data, some of them will be credit card details, a real mixture of different things. Therefore, in order to stop this figure from growing too fast, cybersecurity, as well as things like data protection and other data management standards, are all designed to reduce the risk of cybersecurity breaches from occurring and disruption from happening to your business or your organisation. It is something to be taken quite seriously, as a cybersecurity breach can affect your ability to deliver your services and may result in regulatory action. One of the main causes for cybersecurity attacks are things that are designed to cause some sort of business disruption. This could be operational disruption, attacking a server so that your staff can't work, your systems can't work, or your website goes down. It could result in loss of earning, therefore you cannot take or make money. It could result in reputational damage. If your systems or processes get hacked, and that then is available in the public domain, it could mean that you are not trusted, or that in the way that you handle the situation ends up with damaging or harming your reputation. It could also result in loss of sensitive data, for example personal data, commercial data or government sensitive information, all of which can affect your ability to deliver your services, all of which that have serious implications either to the person who the personal data belongs to, or your third parties, the government, etc. Therefore it's key, in order to deliver your services and protect your reputation and protect your organisation, that you know what your cybersecurity risks are and you put controls in place accordingly to manage them. There have been lots of incidents in the press over the last few years that relate to cybersecurity breaches, some of them more famous than others. One of the most famous ones in the UK was the WannaCry incident that affected the NHS a couple of years ago. This affected a number of NHS organisations by locking a lot of their networks, therefore they couldn't access drives, couldn't access systems, couldn't access services. In a report that was put into the Telegraph, it was claimed by the Department of Health that it cost the NHS about £92 million and resulted in about 19,000 NHS appointments being cancelled or postponed. Now for the NHS, that's a massive level of disruption. This affects lives and potentially could have put lives at risk. In 2017, Instagram was suffered the result of a cybersecurity attack when the phone numbers and email addresses of 6 million users around the world were made public and available for purchase on the dark net after someone was able to get in and access them. This, as a public platform, this affected a number of people and again affects trust in the organisation's ability to look after the users that use it. In 2007, the Ashley Madison website that enables people to commit adultery, more than 30 million users across the world, across 40 countries, had their data exposed. Around 30 gigabytes of user data was released and put into the public domain, and Ashley Madison paid out about £13 million worth of compensation. It was determined that the website had a very inadequate security system and didn't have several things in place to be able to protect the data that they were offering. Now, given the service that Ashley Madison offered, you would have expected them to have a degree of security and privacy in place. However, this was not the case. One of the early incidents, back when cybersecurity first started growing as a thing, was in 2011, where Sony suffered a hack of its particular system where the personal data of 77 million users was leaked online. Banking details of tens of thousands of online players was compromised, and Sony was forced to pay $15 million in compensation, plus a few other millions for court fees and the refund of people whose bank accounts had been illegally used. It was one of the first major breaches in cybersecurity around the world, and a lot of it was based on an assumption, in Sony's case, that they had a secure outer wall, therefore they didn't have to worry about more internal controls, and this wasn't the case. If you happen to lose personal data, which most cybersecurity incidents tend to happen, then this could result in a breach of the GDPR. Under the GDPR, a personal data breach is defined as a breach of security leading to the accidental or unlawful destruction, loss, alteration, unauthorized disclosure of, or access to, personal data transmitted, stored, or otherwise processed. Therefore, if your cybersecurity controls fail, and for example, a server goes offline, or is rendered inaccessible and unrecoverable, that could be considered a data loss if there is personal data on it. Just as if a server is stolen, and that information is still accessible and not encrypted in any way, that could also be a personal data breach. If a breach has occurred, and it breaches Principle 6 of the GDPR that requires you to put things in place to protect the data against inappropriate loss or disclosure, then it could be that the Information Commissioner or other appropriate regulators around Europe, and indeed potentially around the globe, as more and more organisations or more countries get data protection related legislation, are forced to take enforcement action. In the UK, for example, the Information Commissioner's Office has taken a number of areas of action already under the GDPR for the inappropriate management and security of personal data. In this instance, for example, it was determined that the doorstep dispensary had inappropriate security controls in place to manage physical personal data. But there have already been some examples where the ICO has already gone after people for lack of cybersecurity controls. The Information Commissioner has a number of powers available to them, which includes ordering a review of what you're doing if they don't believe it's good enough, ordering you to do something if they think that you should do it and you haven't done it already, compulsory or voluntary audits to come and check what you're doing, issue a decision notice on what you're doing, or take enforcement action, which could include a civil monetary penalty of either up to £17 million for public sector organisations or 4% of global annual turnover for undertakings. Already, the ICO has announced an intention to fine Marriott Hotels for a cybersecurity breach, and this particular breach involved a breach on a particular database that Marriott had acquired when they acquired another hotel chain. Rather than doing due diligence on that database and what they'd purchased, they just purchased it regardless, and it had a cybersecurity vulnerability in it. This enabled someone to access millions of users' details and flog them on something called the dark web. The ICO has also announced it's in planning to take action against British Airways for a similar sort of breach. In this instance, it was the BA's own system, and in this particular instance, again, globally, millions of records were accessed, including credit card data, bank details, name, address, date of birth, things like that. Both particular fines the ICO is looking to progress, and both particular fines were for a lack of cybersecurity controls, where the ICO felt that both organisations should have more appropriate controls in place and lacked in their cybersecurity. So what does cybersecurity focus on? Cybersecurity looks at controls that are designed to protect the confidentiality of that data, protecting data against unintentional, unlawful or unauthorized access, disclosure or theft. A typical area of concern is, for example, privileged users and insider threats, those sorts of things. We'll explain a little bit more on in a minute. You'll also put in controls in place to protect the integrity of data. That's to say, the maintenance of and the assurance of the accuracy and consistency of that data over its entire life cycle. Therefore, people can't either accidentally or intentionally change it or corrupt it in any way. The integrity of the processing. Processing integrity provides assurance that everything in the audited system is complete, valid, accurate, timely, and authorized correctly. Therefore, if I build a system to manage my records and my data, that system comes up to certain standards, and I can stand by that system to say that that is a valid, accurate system or accurate record, and no one outside of those that are authorized to access it have accessed it. And availability. Make sure that information and systems are available when they're needed. This includes in times of distress. And there is a direct link here to the practice of business continuity and organisational resilience. They're effectively one and the same. Typical threats to cybersecurity are broken up into different types. You've got the internal staff threat, the external people threat, and the evolving technology threat. What we mean by internal staff threats are where members of staff will use unchecked software and technology, including things like bringing your own device, and software that they haven't checked or secured in any way, that may cause data to become exposed. If they click on suspicious links because they don't check an email, they just see something that looks genuine and therefore click on it and something is downloaded, that could cause issues, especially if they're getting malware into and onto a device. Changing settings on devices because they want something to work for their purposes without actually checking with security to make sure it doesn't expose the device to any particular threats. Not following policies and procedures. And theft, both intellectual property theft and personal data theft. For example, someone may well leave an organisation and take some of their work or their clients with them. That is theft, and if there aren't controls in place to prevent that, then that could cause disruption and issues for your service and your personal data. There are the obvious external threats, and these traditionally are the threats that most people associate with cybersecurity. So, for example, hacking into network connections through vulnerabilities in the settings, the way a system or connection has been coded, or the technology itself. For example, using Wi-Fi on or public Wi-Fi, unsecured public Wi-Fi to access your work technologies. If they aren't secured in such a way, then people can spy on your access through that particular Wi-Fi connection. Sending in phishing emails to enable ransomware to be downloaded. Bombarding your particular network to cause it to collapse. If I, for example, send loads of queries, lots of particular types of hacks on a particular firewall, and that causes it to overload, its default position will then be to shut down, therefore bringing your services to a standstill. It's often referred to as what's known as a brute force attack. I could also engage in social engineering, and this is where someone tries to gain important information to use against the organisation by using members of staff's manners or willingness to help or willingness to try and bend the system in order to gain information. This could also include tailgating physically into different places, both on site and at some of your third-party locations. The third is evolving technology threats. These could be innovative hacking attacks, clever ways of getting around modern technology so they can hack into your system and it will take you a while to detect it. New viruses and malware not in the antivirus or malware definition libraries, therefore your antivirus system doesn't know to look for them or can't recognise them. Slow patches to be released to plug holes in software. If some of the big software companies are slow to release patches that plug particular holes in their software, then it's something that a vulnerability that you've got to carry with you for a period of time. There could also be unknown holes in their software, where the software developers just don't know that vulnerability is there yet. Therefore, if they don't know, you don't know. And there could be an unknown risk and threat to your organisation. So how do we manage all of this? There are various frameworks out there to help you. In this particular example, this is from the NIST Cybersecurity framework that talks about the traditional risk management framework, identifying what you've got, putting controls in place to protect it, detecting when things are going wrong, responding to it, and then recovering from it. You've got the UK Government Cyber Essentials scheme that's run by the UK Government, designed to give organisations a basic framework for how they comply and put cyber controls in place, which they can be assessed against. You've got the ISO 27000 and 27001 framework that gives you an information security risk management program, a management system that looks at people threats, premises, hard copy information, data, IT systems and hardware, including your supply chain security. You've got ISO 22301, which looks at business continuity, how your systems can cope in a crisis, how you recover your networks and devices, things like that, and how staff continue to work when a server goes down or data is unavailable. You've got ISO 31000, which is the risk management framework. This sets frameworks and processes for being able to spot risk, manage risk, and audit risk, so that no matter what the risk is, whether it's IT or otherwise, it can be managed in a consistent way, and that everyone approaches risk in a consistent way. You've also got a specific framework that's operated by the card providers. This is called PCI DSS, or Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. This is designed to set rules in place very similar to ISO 27001, but this specifically looks at the management of card data or credit card data. This talks about the technologies, systems, processes and staff that look after such data, and the rules and expectations that are put in place to ensure that credit card data is not compromised, lost or stolen in any way. This is operated by the Payment Card Industry Standards Council, and is something that again you can get accredited to if it's something that you're doing quite frequently. The PCI Standards Council also has the power to withdraw your payment card facilities if you consistently fail to meet PCI DSS requirements. The key to understanding cybersecurity is to first understand what risks you have. Know what assets are important to your organisation, what you've got. Understand how the organisation's IT infrastructure was structured, what servers have you got, where are they, what controls are in place, what software and settings you are using, what firewalls are in place, those sorts of things. It's also key to understand your staff culture and understanding of technology. If staff don't even understand the basics of how technology works, then they'll always not understand cybersecurity and not understand the messages that you put out, encourage them to do things. They don't understand what a hack is or what a suspicious email is. Therefore, in order for people to understand cybersecurity, you may need to improve their understanding of technology. Make sure that you put appropriate controls in place. Once you know what it is you've got, work out what the threats could be that particular type of that asset, and then put controls in place to mitigate it. These can include things like automatically scanning things, business continuity controls, firewalls, architecture setup, access controls, asset management, third-party management, various different bits and pieces. Ensure that whatever you use, whatever network control you put in place or technology control you put in place, that it is trusted, it is controlled, and that there's no way for a member of staff to circumvent it. Make sure that user privileges are controlled, monitored and limited so that no one person has absolute power over the network. It's always tested, it's always controlled, and that way no one can, for example, download an entire database and just leave the building with it without anyone noticing. Systems are designed to be secure, and the processes are in place to review and maintain that system. So if you do deploy a new server, a new system, whatever it might be, it comes up to certain standards and it's fit for purpose, and you keep it that way. Make sure that the controls you do put in place you look to review. This can either be a proactive review or it can be part of an audit program. Are things like the firewall, etc. up to date and working correctly? Have they been tested? When was the last time you did a penetration test? Are systems being deployed with the correct settings, and are these being maintained? What controls have failed recently, and are these being checked for patterns? So for example, if the firewall always fails on a Friday night at 8 o'clock, why is that? What is causing that? Is it something systematic, or is it something beyond your control? And are staff reporting when things fail or aren't working correctly? Your view of your cybersecurity controls will always be different to the staff's. Therefore, you need to ensure that staff report when things don't work and report when things are looking suspicious. They don't try and deal with it themselves, they do seek help as soon as possible. It's also important to learn from failures. When things do go wrong, when you do have an incident or whatever it might be, investigate what went wrong. Make sure that everyone is being reported as thoroughly as possible, and they are being investigated to work out what caused it, what control failed. Ensure that when an incident does occur, it is logged against that particular control. So if, for example, your password management system is always letting people create passwords that are made up of 1, 2, 3, and it's not designed to do that, is there something wrong? Is it staff have found a way around it, or is the system just not set up correctly and you need to change something? If someone's always forgetting their password, do they need additional training and support? Those sorts of things. Are lessons learned shared with wider key stakeholders? Do you analyse those incidents over a period? Do you debrief after a major incident, or even a major test? So every year when you do your annual testing and penetration testing, what lessons are there to be learnt from that, and how can you improve? Are you always looking for ways to improve our cybersecurity so you can be ahead of the curve as much as you can? And are staff aware of what to do and what to look out for? Yes, you want to encourage them to report about incidents, but try and see if you can find ways to improve their overall technology understanding. So they embrace technology, they embrace systems, and they then see and are on the lookout for vulnerabilities and threats. They are your biggest asset, as well as your biggest weakness. So here are some examples of different types of home and mobile working threats. So for example, a loss of a device. You could put things in place to affect the impact. So for example, putting encryption on the device. So if it is lost, it doesn't really mean anything. You could have policies and training for staff so they know how to not lose it in the first place, but if they do then lose it, how they'll then be able to report to it and know who to report to. You could place storage limits on files on that particular device so that you can only access one file at a particular time. That way then if the device is ever lost, it's only got one file on it and that's it. If you've got unauthorized access to a device, you could put things in place like 2 or 3 factor authentication so that someone with a device needs additional information in order to get in. They can't just open it up and there it all is. You can make sure that passwords or the key code standards make sure that it's got a thorough, good password or key code. That way then it's not just things like password 1, 2, 3. And again, you could issue training for staff so that they know not to, for example, provide family members with access to the device because they want to play on the phone. To prevent unauthorized access to the device connection, so this is where a device is accessing Wi-Fi and someone is trying to mirror it in order to get in and spoof that particular device. You can make sure your firewall settings are set up correctly and perhaps even offer staff working from a laptop a private VPN. Therefore, if they are using public Wi-Fi, things like that, they are protected. You could even block use of public Wi-Fi. Staff are not allowed to access work-based information from things like coffee shop Wi-Fi and things like that. If you've got staff working from home and there's disruption to that remote connection, you could, for example, make sure that you do thorough and frequent load and capacity testing. How many users can the server handle at any given time? Can it handle all staff on that server at one particular time? If it can't, what can you do to try and improve that? What does that mean for your business continuity plans, and can staff work analogically rather than digitally? And then for unauthorized storage of data on a third-party device, you could even block all usage of private devices, so you store it on a business-controlled device and that's it. Or you could block things like webmail and other remote access, so people only access your data, your systems, your connections via approved, recognised and acknowledged devices that you know and that you've made sure are correct and above board. So look at the type of threat and make sure that you put controls in place to either mitigate the impact of that event occurring or the chance of that event occurring. And if the controls you put in place don't do either and don't affect either in any way, then what's the point in having them? You also need to consider some key roles within cybersecurity. There will be your role, whatever that role may be, but there'll also be some key roles within the business. There'll often be IT and those that are responsible for the deployment and management of that particular technology. There'll be the Human Resources Department for staff. There'll be the Senior Information Risk Owner for what is acceptable to the business and what isn't. And there'll be the Data Protection Officer for how this affects data protection risk. Therefore, think about how each key role can help you. Can they advise you? Can they guide you? Can they train you on various different things? How can HR help with things like education, disciplinary if someone consistently breaches the policy? How can you help them? So how can you help IT to understand that the things they do, the control they have and the processes they follow are there for a reason? How can you help the CIRO make decisions around key high risks based on potentially aspects of technology that they're not trained on and not aware of how they work? How can you bring these key roles together? Can you have, for example, an information governance board or a cybersecurity board where they meet frequently to discuss cybersecurity issues and set strategy so that the executive is briefed on what cybersecurity threats there are and knows that it's in good hands? Some key takeaways then. It's important to know what information and technology you have and therefore how important it is to the business. The more important it is, the more cybersecurity controls you want to put in place. Also, the more important it is, the more of a target it's likely to be. What controls are there in place already, and what controls are in place that you do need to put in place in order to protect information and technology? Is there an incident process in place to investigate when controls fail? Is this thorough? Does it get to the root cause? Do you have a plan for business continuity? Is that tested? Or does it just become something that sits in a folder and is only dusted off once in a blue moon? Are staff trained on cybersecurity threats? And what do you do if the worst happens? Do staff know how to respond to them? Do they know who to report them to? Do they know what a phishing email is? Things like this. If you've got a good grasp of what information you've got and what controls you've got and what risks you've got, then you'll have a good grasp of cybersecurity, and even when the worst happens, you're equipped to deal with it.